Jamie Dornan couldn't look Dakota in the face when he said goodbye. In the end, family comes first. Jamie Dornan stood backstage, in the long shadows of the curtain. The spotlights shone brightly on the audience filling the seats, cameras, cheers, applause, but he could hear nothing but his own heart. Dakota Johnson was out there, in front of the lights, in a role they had both rehearsed many times. The breeze blew through her hair, the light glinting in the golden strands, her lips trembling as she whispered her final lines. Jamie took a deep breath. He knew this would be their last performance together, not because of art or the end of their contract, but because the unsaid things between them weighed heavily on his heart. He looked down at the floor, down at his hand holding the mic, down at his shoes, anything to avoid looking at Dakota. Because if he saw, really saw, he wouldn't be able to say goodbye to the day without words. Before the spotlights came up, Dakota walked backstage. She paused for a few seconds by the big screen door, where the audience had gathered. She heard Jamie's footsteps, heavier than usual. She turned, but he had backed away, avoiding her gaze, as if afraid she would see anything in his eyes other than the coldness he tried so hard to hide. Dakota called, her voice trembling slightly. "Jamie, today we..." Jamie just nodded slightly. He said nothing more. His heart felt like it was being torn to pieces, partly because of the breakup, partly because he knew she was waiting for an explanation, partly because he didn't dare let her see the pain in him. In that moment, the light behind Dakota flashed, casting her shadow onto the wide stage. Dakota stood by the screen door, the light glaring in her eyes. Jamie turned away, looking away, at the wall, at the nail that had just been hammered into the wooden floor. He didn't dare look at her, because if he did, he would see the longing, the hurt, even the hope that remained somewhere in her, and he knew he had hurt her. 3. The unspoken reason. For a while now, Jamie had felt caught between two worlds. On one side was work, the lights, the stage, the fans, the cameras. On the other side was family, his elderly mother back home, his long-dead father, his siblings, and Dakota, who had always been there for him like a safe haven. Dakota understood him, loved him, not just because Jamie Dornan was a star, but because Jamie Dornan was a man with fears and small wishes that no one knew about. They talked on the phone every night. Dakota told him about that day's scene, about the role, about the audience's reactions, about Jamie's eyes when she acted with her. Jamie listened, laughed, but inside he felt a heavier weight. He felt like he was losing himself, losing his family, losing his sense of security, losing the simple truth of love. His job required him to struggle between the light, the spotlight, with others looking at him and expecting him to be strong, steadfast, tough, when all he wanted was to go home, to hear his heart at peace, to have a night with Dakota by his side, no role, no lights, no audience. But when he saw the scenes with his own eyes, Dakota looking at him, the hope in her eyes, the light reflecting off her cheeks, her lips trembling, Jamie understood that she was longing for something beyond the screen. She wasn't just acting for him, she seemed to want him to look at her the way he used to look at her, but he was afraid. He was afraid that if his eyes met that expectation, she would think he chose her forever, and when he couldn't, there would be a more painful breakup. Moment on stage. The lights came up. Dakota stepped onto the stage, her feet light, her white dress pure, her long hair flowing naturally. The audience applauded, the cameras flashed. Dakota began her first line. Jamie followed behind the wings, saw her figure, her back tilted slightly, her shoulders inhaling. He wanted to step out, take her hand, say, "I'm sorry," but his legs were as hard as stone. He didn't dare. They acted. The scene was romantic, the light was bright, the wind was gentle. Dakota said words of love, Dakota looked at Jamie, Jamie said words in return. But when it came to the final scene, the scene where Jamie's character had to say goodbye. He spoke, but he didn't look at Dakota. The line rang out, "I can't go on, Dakota." Jamie paused. The toes of his shoes hit the wooden floor softly. He closed his eyes, then continued, "Family. Family is still the most important thing to me." He saw Dakota's hands shaking. She said nothing, just stood there, her eyes on him, but he still didn't dare look. He looked to the side, up at the stage lights, at the audience in the distance, but not at her. Dakota stood still. The light fell on her face. She could see Jamie's lips moving, and then the dialogue continued. "I hope you understand, what I do, what I can't do, isn't out of love, but because I have to keep my family at heart. I don't want to be two-faced between work and my responsibilities to the people I love." Versus behind the curtain. When the performance ended, the applause was as loud as it had ever been. Dakota bowed to the audience, tears silently in her eyes, but she kept her professional demeanor, the bow, the turn, the steady step. Jamie stepped back behind the wings, listening to Dakota's footsteps as she passed. He still didn't dare look at her. The backstage was empty, the lights shining through the heavy curtains, the audience tickets folded, the shadows shrinking in the darkness. He heard her footsteps fade away, then stop. A few minutes later, when the backstage was empty, Jamie came out. He looked for her in the dressing room, where the large mirror showed everyone's tired, yet professional faces. He looked at the half-closed door, the light falling on the doorknob. The door opened. Dakota stood there, her shoulders thin, her eyes red, her lips pressed together, not in anger, but in a deep, silent distance. Jamie leaned against the doorframe, one hand on the door. He wanted to say something. To hold her hand, to apologize, but the words were stuck in his throat. He didn't dare look at her. Dakota whispered, "Jamie, why don't you look at me?" Her voice wasn't crying, but it was shaking. Jamie lowered her head, her eyes on the floor, then shifted her gaze to the side to avoid her eyes. Because if I look at you, you'll see, all I've given up." He sighed. "I'm sorry, Dakota. I need time. I need to keep my family, keep my promise to my mother, to you, but work is taking me further than I thought." Dakota stood still, silent. "Keep my promise to your mother? To me? You talk like I've never been a part of your family." Jamie looked up, met her eyes, finally. But his eyes held weariness, regret, and love and fear. "You've always been indispensable, Dakota. But I can't do both, the job I love and the family I've always wanted to protect. I'm lost, and I'm afraid if I continue, I'll lose both, via the painful process." The days that followed were silent. Dakota would go home, lie in her small apartment every night, look at her phone, wait for a text, wait for a call from Jamie. But there was nothing but absence. Jamie was filming in another city, work, schedules. And Dakota knew, she had been sidelined from the big projects. She was no longer the first person he thought of when the scene ended, when the camera turned off, when he needed to hug a loved one. He thought of his mother, of his dead father, of his responsibility to his family, to his roots. Dakota wondered if she had been wrong to think that their love would conquer all. She remembered the days when Jamie had said, "You are my home." Now, home might not just be her. It was where his sick mother was, where his responsibilities were, where his commitments were that he could not avoid. She hurt, but she did not scream. She kept it inside. She still went to the stage to perform, still smiled for posters, still took promotional photos, still talked to the camera. But there was a void in her eyes, eyes Jamie had once called alive, hopeful. Jamie lived in two worlds, one of stage, camera, lights, one of family, responsibility. His heart always turned to home, to his mother, to his sister. He understood that his responsibility to his family was a part of him that he could not abandon. And when he looked into Dakota's face to say goodbye, he saw her, but he also saw himself, and the two gazes met, unable to merge. Choice. Family first. One winter morning, with the fog still lingering at the window, Jamie went home, not to a hotel or a luxury apartment, but to the small house where his mother lived. He opened the door and saw her sitting knitting by the window overlooking the snowy garden. She looked up, smiling softly. "Are you home, Jamie?" Jamie smiled gently, putting down his luggage. "Yes, I am home." He looked into his mother's eyes, eyes that had dimmed with age, but still bright, still waiting for his son to return. He thought, the nights away, the days of filming, the promises he had not been able to keep, all piled up on his back like a burden. His mother didn't need many words, just asked, just invited him to eat, then quietly stood by him. And in that peaceful moment, Jamie realized that what he needed to protect was not the spotlight, not the successful role, but her heart, the mother who raised him, the memories of his childhood, the place he returned to when tired, not the stage amidst applause. Jamie wondered, if he continued to choose work, would he have enough strength to keep the person he loved, to keep the truth in his feelings? He remembered what Dakota said, "I want you to look at me." He knew she wanted him to choose her, wanted him to put her on the same level as responsibility, wanted him to be not just a star, but a man brave enough to consider family and love as one. But now, Jamie knew in his heart that he had prioritized family. Not because he didn't love Dakota, on the contrary, he loved her even more, but because he understood, if he didn't lay a solid foundation for his family, if he didn't repay his mother, if he didn't fulfill his responsibility to his roots, then everything he built on the outside, reputation, love, could fall apart.